Thank you for joining me, Ezekiel.
Oh, anytime. Thanks for inviting me.
It's my pleasure, and maybe we should begin by apologizing to our listeners and viewers, Ezekiel, because in our previous recording there was a bit of an issue with the sound, and some people have expressed disappointment. It was some sort of glitch. I think maybe I was responsible for that, but I haven't quite figured out what happened. But I hope that today is going to be smoother for our viewers' sake. But thank you for coming on again, Ezekiel. I take it for granted that every one of our listeners will know you, so I don't usually bother to introduce you, but just in case, Ezekiel is a professor of history at Kettering University in the United States of America. But more relevant for us, he's a commentator on Ethiopian affairs, a speaker, and he writes a lot. He's an essayist, you could say, and he has a lot of insights about what is happening in Ethiopia, in Eritrea, and in the Horn of Africa. And today I thought we would tackle two issues, Ezekiel. The first one, domestic in relation to Ethiopia, and the other one, something we could describe as foreign in relation to what is happening between Ethiopia and Eritrea, and maybe Egypt, time allowing. To the first point, there were two very telling events in Ethiopia, at least for me. One was the sentencing of Taye Dendea, I think it was 2 weeks ago. And everybody knows that was a sham sentencing. I don't think there is anybody who believes that Taye Dendea committed any crime. I think it's clear to everybody that it was completely trumped up charge, and the whole process is sham to silence him and to threaten people who express views clearly in the way that he did, and courageously, I might say. But I was struck by the fact that there wasn't any reaction by way of opposition, by way of outrage about what was happening. And that got me wondering whether Ethiopia was now a totalitarian state where everybody has been silenced completely and the D leader reigns supreme and there is no whiff of opposition. And that view was strengthened for me a couple of days ago when the regime arrested social media influencers. It looks like now the regime feels entitled to go into private affairs of individuals. The crime that the social media influencers have allegedly committed is indecent attire, which is in the realm of private life. So I want you, Ezekiel, to tell us what is happening in terms of that. Where did the opposition go? Why did it disappear? Why does Abiy seem to have complete control on the country now?
I am not quite sure the idea that Abiy is completely in control of the country is the correct characterization of what is going on in Ethiopia. And like you just said, I hope that I could be heard today. And I apologize, as you said, something is wrong, but I'm a technical person. So I hope that I'm heard today. Now, I think you used the silencing, the deafening silence after Taye's sentencing, why there is no outrage in Ethiopia. I think you're right. You're right that it is revealing something. The regime is unpopular. There's no doubt about that. It is unpopular. It has antagonized almost every section of the Ethiopian population. But it is unopposed because it has decimated, as one long-term observer of the Ethiopian political scene put it, that one of its success is in decimating the opposition. That is even in comparison to the EPRDF regime, where people erupted in rebellion, not because of economic issues, not so much because of economic issues, but because of the suppression of democratic and civil rights. People were demanding their rights. And and they were to some extent confident that there may be some backlash, but they could overcome it. This regime, as they say, they have learned from the mistakes of past authoritarian regimes in Ethiopia, and that's one of their major lessons. So what they did was simply to decimate, to annihilate any organized opposition. So that's one thing. The other thing is that it's not in control of the political system or the state or the people or any infrastructure of domination in the country, but it is unchallenged because of the first thing that I said. It's unchallenged. So that is the issue. What does it tell us? The silence. Everyone understands that the sentence is political. Everyone understands that Taye's sentencing is political. The charges are frivolous. Of the three charges, one is the one that the one about possession of arms that the courts found him to be responsible. But everyone in Ethiopia knows that military or political leaders are protected. They're armed. It's political, but they also understand that everyone in Ethiopia also understands the cost of speaking out, for both for Taye himself and for oneself that speaks. I think if people are outraged and spoke against the government, if they came out, number one, it's not good for Taye himself. It's going to strengthen the resolve of the government to do something very bad to Taye, and it's already clear that they have moved him from a prison where he could be protected to a prison where he could be harmed. So people understand that. And secondly, they also understand that if they are siding with Taye, that they are also risking their own lives. And the government has simply demonstrated that it has no compassion for human life. It doesn't hesitate to eliminate any opposition or potential opposition. So people have withdrawn. But it doesn't mean that outrage is not there. It's individualized. It's expressed on social media. It's expressed in private spaces. It's that it is not expressed in a collective way. Otherwise, you can see, if people who monitor the media could see that individualized expression of outrage, people who are outside. And you can see the comments, and I think that's what people are doing. So it's not collective because the organized opposition has been decimated, as I said, but it's not complete absence of outrage. So the public has learned that public outrage without leverage, without an organization, invites severe punishment. So they have retreated into what is known as allegorical protest. Allegorical protest, that is the weapons of the weak, everyday forms of resistance, the thick transcript of domination. That's what is happening in Ethiopia. It's not the complete absence of resistance or outrage, but they're expressed in a very different way. And that is what brings me to your second point as an example. Why crack down on social media and your apparel, whatever the way you're clothed. The federal police started it, and the Addis Ababa police followed suit and are arresting social media presence, the popular ones, and also that people were outfitting themselves with ways that are in contradistinction with the Ethiopian public appearance. That's what it is. Now, why crack down on the social media? It's exactly because of what I just said, that expression of disapproval is on social media. People have withdrawn to allegorical protest. For instance, when one of the social media, one of the popular ones, was arrested, people were writing underneath in the social media. They were writing about it, saying it's not right to, it's not correct, it's not acceptable to be more popular than the prime minister. Those are commentaries that you see under the arrest announcement. The reason is clear. This guy that was arrested, Adonai, I think is his name, had a social media event on the same day that the prime minister was on television, talking about the training that he gave to his acolytes in the party, at the same time. And at some point in time, there only one person was watching him when the social media event was the entire youth in Ethiopia had migrated there. And one person, and one social commentator said, it's probably the technician that was broadcasting it that was watching. And of course, we know the personality, the prickly personality of the prime minister. So he's cracking down because that is really where people assemble. That's where the crowd is. That is where the young are. So the potential, this time they assembled there for entertainment reasons, you could say. But this is what could be turned around and could be used as a social media coordinated campaign against the government. So that is what is going on with that. With the clothing, what is the Ethiopian standard attire? How is that the Ethiopians are dressed? Because the crime that these people had committed is that it's inconsistent with Ethiopia's way of dressing. Well, what is Ethiopia's dressing? If you go to Surma or some other places, people are walking naked. Is that Ethiopian or not Ethiopian? Or in Addis Ababa, you see government officials dressed up in Western suits. They should be arrested too, because the way they are dressed is not Ethiopian. So you could see that how frivolous the thing is, but it also shows that in Ethiopia, fear has replaced hope. Fear has replaced confidence on the part of the government. It's under siege, but fear has also replaced hope for expression of an organized emotion. So that is basically what it is showing to me. What is happening is, I think that's what your question is, that Ethiopia is in the face of authoritarian consolidation after the civil war. The center is trying to re-centralize authority. It is also trying to neutralize the nationalities-based actors, and actors meaning like the Fano and the Ola. And it is trying to reframe itself internationally as the only visible state builder, cracking down on any dissent that might be cultural, political, or otherwise.
Can you expand a little bit on what you mean by allegorical protest? It strikes me as something that might capture a lot of the things that people are doing in Ethiopia. So for the benefit of our listeners, if you could explore that concept a little bit.
Yeah. In Ethiopia, there is what they call wax and gold. You say one thing, and then you have a deniability because of the field of semantics in attaching meaning to what anyone says. So people in Ethiopia have always used what I called allegorical protest, is that they have always used double speak, for instance, like in wax and gold, double speak to criticize the government. Like the emperor, during the emperor's time, there is a law called lèse majesté. Someone says something in the gold, in the wax, but there is another meaning in the gold. So people use this space between the wax meaning and the gold meaning, and then they use the semantic field, the area where you could interpret, to speak against the government. That's an allegorical protest. Or the example that I just used, where the social media person was, when he was arrested, you could see the commentary under, see that you're wrong to speak against the prime minister. Well, what they're saying is not like they're defending the prime minister. All they're saying is, you became too popular for the prime minister not to tolerate you. So that is what I meant by allegorical protest. It's like the anthropologist, politician named James Scott had written books on weapons of the weak, like foot dragging. People do not confront you because confronting means certain death. In that situation, people withdraw from that area, from the area of protest in the public realm, to protesting in different ways. All of this kind of expressions and weapons that the weak use, those kinds of protests at some point in time gather momentum. They organize. People come to the same area. Or I could use another example. Hachalu Hundeessa, during the Oromo protest, was, they say, the soundtrack of the protest. He was singing. It was a song. They expressed that, the outrage through their artistic creativity. There is what is known as Gerarsa in Afaan Oromo. In Gerarsa, people sing. It's a different genre of music, but it's there that people used to connect. Non-Oromos don't understand what is going on. Only the Oromo, even among the Oromo, a few people who are aware of the cultural meanings of some dictums that understand. So songs are used to express the innermost feelings of human beings, and they come together. The people are organized because they connect at those levels where the government cannot discover. But that was then, see, that was then under the EPRDF. EPRDF, maybe they don't understand Afaan Oromo, so they did not crack down. But the connections were being made at the time, which then erupted in a form of protest against the regime. That's what I meant by allegorical protest.
Well, the point about, for instance, Hachalu Hundeessa was that it didn't matter what exactly he was saying. What was really threatening for the APRDF was that he was popular, that people were rallying around him. I think that was what was threatening for the regime. And the point you're making is that although people might not be directly confronting the regime, they do find ways of expressing the absurdity of the whole thing, and that is what is happening. But the difference now between the APRDF and the Abiy regime seems to be that, whereas maybe the APRDF was relatively, maybe I don't know if lenient is the right word with those aspects of life, Abiy seems to be determined to crush every aspect of life. That is what the crackdown on the social media influencers signifies to me. But another word that you use, Ezekiel, is that there is a sense of resignation and withdrawal among the people from political life out of fear because of the brutality. And that sense of resignation, I think, applies to political parties as well. You don't see any political party that is even in the mildest critical of the regime. I have never heard of any statement or any rally. Well, I think that is beyond the question in Ethiopia now, any sort of protest demonstration. And so you have that on the one hand, complete absence of opposition, complete absence of free expression, complete absence of critical voices. But on the other hand, the regime is saying that they are preparing for elections. And how do we reconcile these two things?
Now, let me start with the point that you raised about the EPRDF and Abiy. I think the EPRDF, even under Meles, a man that was seen as the all-powerful leader and presence, even under him there was an organization. There was the EPRDF. There was the military. There was the security apparatus. Remember, we did not know who the security leader is. I think for many years it was Getachew Asafa, but you did not know what he looked like. Even today, we don't know what he looks like because they were working as security agencies do, covertly, undercover, without being visible. We did not know the military generals under the EPRDF because they were doing their jobs as an institution. Probably we know the chief of staff. Other than that, we don't know we did not know under the EPRDF who the commander of that corps or that command or that division. We now know all of them. We now know all of them because the structure is not working. Even the military is connected to only one man, to Abiy, and they take their orders from him, and he divides them. He divides and conquers even the institution of the military. He has multiple systems of control, pitting one group against the other. That was not true under the EPRDF. There was a structure. What does this translate to? It translates to Abiy living under perpetual schizophrenia. Everybody is his enemy. Even his apparent supporters in the security structure, in the military structure, in the administrative structure, they are not ideologically aligned with him. They have no confidence in him. He doesn't keep them in one place. He reshuffles his cabinet every now and then, 85 times since he came to power, for God's sakes. So what I'm trying to say is that this is the one-man rule. It's a personalist dictatorship. So he lives in this field of paranoia, so he has to be really brutal. And that brings me to this issue of why does he appear to silence everyone? Why is it that everyone is not speaking? I think I have already partially addressed what that means, but let me try to elaborate by, it's not only one thing, it's the personality of the person, the absence of structure, the personality meaning the schizophrenia that he suffers from, that the structure is not his. So he is under this ecosystem of control that is fragmented. Speaking of the opposition, that is. But the entire populace itself, after many years of war, repression, economic stress, the society is militarized and politically exhausted. People are exhausted. I sympathize with the people of Ethiopia because they were betrayed by the elite. The elite that supported the change of government under EPRDF embraced a part of that EPRDF and wanted to use that as a weapon to fight against another group. What I mean by that is the people who were in Asmara, for instance, organized by, not organized, but supported by the Eritrean regime, who were fighting against the EPRDF, now fully embraced a part of the EPRDF because Prosperity Party is the EPRDF. EPRDF 2.0, as Marara Gudina calls them. They embraced them so that they can get at the defeated TPLF. And they don't stop. There's no principle. There's no principle that oppression done by TPLF or done by the PP it shouldn't matter to people who have principles, to elites who are educated with the support of the Ethiopian people, should be principled against domination, against oppression, against repression, no matter who is doing it. But the Ethiopian people were betrayed by the elite. I don't know of any other country where the populace, they went out and fought, they died, they paid a price, a huge price, not only in the fight against the EPRDF or the TPLF-dominated EPRDF, but under the Derg, under the emperor. For 60, 70 years, the Ethiopian people have been paying an exorbitant price. But they're betrayed, always betrayed by the elite. So they're exhausted. They're exhausted. They can't see hope, and that's what I meant, that fear had replaced hope. So that is about the fragmentation and the exhaustion of the Ethiopian society as a whole. Secondly, every major constituency, the Oromo, the Amara, the Tigrayan, the urban youth, the elite, are divided internally, divided ideologically, divided ethnically. And even though this was in place, for God's sakes, even though this was in place, at the time it was in place, but this regime had used it to widen the difference, to widen the gap between these constituencies. They are internally divided. So fragmentation prevents coordinated outrage. Even when injustice abounds, even when injustice is obvious, even when injustice is beyond any human being's ability to bear, if there is no organized, coordinated body, it's very difficult to express a collective outrage. And one thing that needs to be said, when I say repression, the repression used by the mode of repression, the model of repression under the EPRDF is not total. It's not blanket. It's selective repression. The state no longer relies on mass arrests alone. It does that in some places, but it also uses targeted persecution, such as people like Taye. It uses as a case for a demonstration. You go against me, this is what happens to you. Taye was the most loyal, fervent servant of this state, a public servant. But once he criticizes, look at what happens to him. So there is this targeted persecution. Others were killed, like Gebissa or Hachalu Hundeisa. They were killed. By the way, Hachalu became popular not during the protest, but before, in the lead up to the protest. That's when he was articulating the situation that the Oromo people were under. So this targeted persecution under the PP government is the model that they use for persecution. The other is the legalistic, using the legal apparatus to repress the anti-terror laws that are used left and right for small infractions and for alleged crimes. The courts, we just used the Taye's case, the court that found him responsible for possession of arms sentenced him to 7 years. They sentenced him to 7 years when the law actually says that the sentencing guideline says only 6 months. All right? So there are also economic pressures that they use, jobs, licenses, contract awarded or denied. All of this creates fear, total fear without dramatic spectacles that could trigger mass resistance. And like I said earlier, the Ethiopians were betrayed, that the elite who are not killed and repressed are co-opted. Many of the opposition, the putative opposition figures, are within the system. They are within parliament, and they are within the advisory bodies to the prime minister or the president of the Oromo region or any other regional administration. Others are given business. So the relationship between the elite that is co-opted in the government is not ideological. It is transactional. So the type of outrage exemplified by the Cairo or any opposition party is impossible right now because of the collapse of the mobilizing structures. The mobilizing structures are either dismantled or absorbed or criminalized or militarized or internally divided. I think spontaneous anger is expressed, it exists, but there is no infrastructure to turn this anger that pervades Ethiopian society into coordinated action. And I think you asked me about elections as well, but you can ask me again about the
Maybe we'll come back to the election. Maybe I was getting ahead of myself. Anyway, we'll get back to the issue of elections, Ezekiel. But I find it fascinating in its negative sense that you are saying the people are living in fear, of course, obviously, because of the brutality of the regime, because of a sense of dejection, a sense of giving up any hope that something good will happen, because they could see things getting from worse to worse on a daily basis. So I understand why the people might be living in a constant state of fear. But you're also saying that the regime officials are also in a state of fear, and maybe the prime minister himself. And that reminds me of an account that I read of Hitler's last days in the bunker when the Russians were closing in. He lost trust in anybody who he used to rely on among his senior officials because he thought that some of them were plotting with the British, with the Russians and all that. And he ordered them to be executed and all that. He was lashing left and right because he was in a state of paranoia, which is a word that he used. And I wonder maybe if that is the state that the PP officials also live. They see what is happening to Taye, for instance. They know their colleague, they know him, he's an upright, an honest man being sentenced simply because he rubbed the prime minister the wrong way and no other reason. And I think some people also ask whether there is some sort of honest conversations among the PP officials. For instance, yesterday we were talking about the foreign minister, and on the face of it, he seems to be a sensible person. If you see the way he speaks, the way he writes, it is reasonable to assume that he understands maybe this whole thing doesn't work and it's falling apart. But you wonder if he does from time to time go to the prime minister and tells him some honest truths, tells him maybe this is not working, maybe we should change, or if it is a house of denial. What do you think about the dynamic of the high-ranking regime officials? Do you think there are moments when they have some honest, brutal conversations, or it's always denial?
No. Nobody tells him anything. It's not only Hitler, by the way. Stalin was the same during his last days. I think most dictators are just like that. Totalitarian dictators are just like that, because they're paranoid. It's not that any official is doing anything. It is the perception that they have, the fear that they have that something is brewing, that something is happening that prompts them to act in a decisive manner, whether that is Hitler or Pol Pot or Stalin. They were the same in their last days. At the moment that Ethiopia is really ruled by government or a man that feels insecure domestically and constrained externally. So he based on this fear, this is his fear that there will be some uprising internally and some pressure from outside. from different quarters, and I don't want to get into that, but he sees no viable alternative except to tighten control. So this fear applies to his officials as well, that they're silent, but silent is not consent. They don't agree with most of what he's doing to that country, that they know that Ethiopia cannot be used as a system that is held together simply by some dysfunctional elite group. They quite understand that, but the elite main practice in Ethiopia, not in theory, but in practice, is that they're not unified. Every elite group acts from their own perception of what is going on and what might happen if they acted. But they're divided. They're not the same. The military has its own. The military brass its own concerns. If they acted, and I don't know what they will do, but what I'm saying is that they are so divided and fragmented and act out of different motivations that they cannot come together to come to a concerted conclusion. They are also part of the same Ethiopian society that is fragmented, but as members of an institution, they also have different fears and different concerns and different interests. For the military, what I think the military elite is what I'm talking about. They're trying to prevent collapse. Their fear is that the state might collapse. The military, meaning the ENDF apparatus, the senior command, the federal intelligence, the federal police, the regional security chiefs, all of these live under this constant fear that if they put the linchpin on the Ethiopian state, if they just remove it, that the Ethiopian state might collapse. Now, I'm not saying they are correct in their analysis, but they operate from that fear, from the position that they are in, from the military responsibility that they have, from the training that they have, and from the personal interest that they protect, and also the fear that they have for themselves. What I mean by this is the chief of staff of the Ethiopian National Defense Force is not protected by his own select guards. He's protected by people from the Republican Praetorian Guard that the Prime Minister assigns to him. And he also fears that his second in command is aspiring to be the chief of staff, and he might be colluding with the Prime Minister to do something to him. So this is the interest that they protect. But as a collective, they want to preserve the country's territorial integrity. After all, they are a national military, as it were. Collectively, that's what their goal is. But also, Abiy himself suppresses some challenges within the generals individually. He retires some. He removes them. Some are removed from them. So all of these insecurities make the military elite act in the way they do right now. But one thing that I should stress about this is my understanding, that they're not ideologically pro-Abiy. I don't think they even know what Abiy wants. I don't think Abiy knows what he wants, except having power, except remaining in the plush office that he's built for himself, in the comfortable palace that he had built for himself, in the now clean city that, I'm using his own word, the clean city where he resides. That's all that matters to him. So they're not ideologically aligned with Abiy. They're not pro-Abiy, but they are living under a trauma shaped psychological structure. They're shaped by the last civil war. They're haunted by the Yugoslavia or the Rwanda scenario of crisis. Now, I don't know if I should go on this one, but there is the administrative elite, for instance. There is the ministers, the regional bureaucracies, the courts. They also have their own interests, their own perceived responsibilities. an interest to protect. They should keep their salaries and the other benefits. Maybe they have families. Look, they don't live by off of their salaries. They travel to many countries, and they get some dollars which they use to support themselves. So they get that. They still are paid of that. They have their benefits. So they will keep the papers moving, saying this is the economic plan, this is what blueprint. They keep moving the papers. They provide some procedural regularity from the man, but they're not, again, ideologically pro-Abiy or aligned with him, except that they really want to they're risk averse. They don't want to do anything to their families. They follow the rules, but they are politically cynical. I speak to some of them. You can't believe what they say, even close to him. They're very cynical, but they are survival oriented. If there is any change that is supposed to come to Ethiopia, it would be from another quarter. A bifurcation between the political elite and the business elite, and the broker between the two. But that's not a question that you asked, so I'm going to leave it that way, that the elite, they act for different reasons. So I just use the example of the bureaucratic elite, the administrative elite, the military elite, but you can go that way to the political parties, to the business, the brokers, all of these networks, the networks that the Abiy commands, pits one against the other, and keeps a rampart between all of them from getting together and colluding against him.
Well, I think I'm curious about the mechanics of how that bifurcation might happen. So we might return to it later. But that is a fascinating insight into the dynamics of the PP regime in Selective, the sense of fear and paranoia and mutual mistrust, I think is fair to say. And the implication is that in that environment, people can't have honest conversations, and if honest conversations are not being had, there is no hope of any course correction. I think that is the implication, because there might be people who know better, like maybe the foreign minister or other people, but they simply don't have the environment that allows them to speak their mind, to say maybe this is something that we shouldn't do. Maybe this is something that we should try. That is not happening, and I don't see how things could change. So if we could widen our net and go to the opposition party then, Ezekiel, you mentioned earlier Merera Gudina, someone that I have a lot of respect for. I think he's a man of integrity, and he tries his best. Maybe, I don't know, at some point he might give up, he might grow impatient and just throw in the towel. I don't know if he will go into that territory. But there was an interesting statement he gave a couple of weeks ago where he said that in the upcoming election, if we can call it election, they're going to stand some candidates in Addis Ababa and around that, but that is only for legalistic purposes, but that otherwise he doesn't trust the process, he doesn't believe there is security guarantee, he doesn't believe in the legitimacy. And I wonder what that means, whether that means giving a degree of legitimacy to the whole election, because in the previous one, he sat out the election and his party, and it was very clear, because he said this is a sham election, we're not going to take part. But now he seems to be kind of equivocating, it seems to me.
No, I mean, that's not equivocation, because even as they announced that they're going to field about 10 candidates, they actually said exactly what you said. That they don't expect the elections to be free, fair, competitive. They don't expect it to be. It will be a confirmation of the government or affirmation of the government. They said that. They said that publicly. But they said we don't want to lose. We don't want to lose because the law says, the electoral law of the country says, if you don't participate in elections twice in a row, you will be automatically delisted, deregistered. What would that mean if they said, all right, we're not going to participate this time? What would that mean? It simply means that it will be deregistered, and they would not have the limited legal forum. The limited legal forum that they have in the preordained election, they will not have anything. So look, to say we're fielding candidates, not because we believe in the outcome or in the process of election, not because we believe the elections project is going to produce different results. We know that it is preordained. It's not worth participating in. It's going to be sham elections. They said that. But we don't want to lose that limited political space. The office that they have in Addis Ababa. So the messages should be clear. It should not be interpreted as if they're equivocating. They're not equivocating. See, the message is clear. The announcement is absolutely clear, abundantly clear that they don't believe in it. But in order to continue their struggle in this limited political space in the country, they have to play by the laws of the country. Otherwise, they will be chucked out of the political realm altogether, which means in the post-election period that there will be no opposition from the Oromo side, at least in the Ecos case. But that's not only the Oromo Federalist Congress, that OFC, that made that statement. It's also the OLF. The OLF also said they're going to field candidates because they want to preserve their legal status in spite of the pressure that is being applied to the OLF. And what I mean by that is the Electoral Board is putting pressure on the OLF to reconcile themselves with the faction that left them and aligned themselves with Abiy, the Kajela Mardasa faction. Look, the last time there was a dispute between the two, the Electoral Board under Birtukan Midexas gave the legitimacy to the Dawood Ibsa faction. This new board, not new, but under a different leadership, reversed that, and they're telling the OLF to get together and sort them among themselves who is the legitimate inheritor, the legitimate scion of the OLF to become. They're saying that you have to come together, both of these sides, you have to come together and hold your assembly, the General Assembly, and then come to us for registering. In what country, after a faction had left, and the board had already recognized the Dawood Ibsa faction as the OLF, now they reverse and then force them to sit together. The intention should be clear. The intention is that this paranoid man wants to dismantle the OLF. And they are engaged in a struggle to preserve that political space, the limited political space that they have under duress. So this is anyone who is in Ethiopia should not see this as equivocation. The statements are clear, but they have to continue to operate. Anyone in that kind of situation is going to do exactly what they had done. By the way, this is not a legitimation of the government. It's simply saying this is a sham election. It's not going to produce different results, but it is for our own sake that we're going to act. That's basically what it is.
So that is interesting. So and maybe this is an time to kind of segue into the TPLF issue as well, because what you're saying is that they are trying to stay on the right side of the law, even though they might not believe in it, but they don't want to get into trouble with the Electoral Commission and all that. So they're going to do the minimum that will allow them to remain registered, right? But then you have the TPLF, which has been, as far as Abiy is concerned, outlawed, and now the TPLF is saying that there won't be any talk of elections in Tigray until and unless they are re-registered. And given the culture of doubling down of Abiy, that is very unlikely to happen. So people are in dark as to what that might mean for Tigray and in relation to the election. And then you have the Amhara region where, because of conflict, I think it's unreasonable to expect that there will be any elections. And you have described briefly the Oromo situation. So we have this context now. And I think it's fair to assume that people will go through the motions in terms of elections. Elections will be had, Abiy will declare victory and all that. But what would that mean in this context for the country and for the international community, and how will people understand it?
Well, first on the general issue of elections. Now, elections are not. I don't think the government is really interested in an election that is going to produce some results. They are simply procedural. That there is a 5-year period. It's a procedural legitimacy exercise, not contest for competitive power. That I didn't say it. It's the prime minister. The Prime Minister of Ethiopia that said exactly these things, that there are people, I'm trying to quote the Prime Minister when he was training his political operatives. He made this statement in which he said, some are saying, roughly translated that is, some are stating that elections should not be held because there is no peace in the country. And he said that this is a ploy to dismantle the constitutional order and the country. This is what he said. Remember what he said 5 years ago. If we held elections, nothing is going to happen. We will continue. And that's exactly what he did. Elections did not happen at the appointed time. They were held a year later and nothing happened. Now he is talking about the opposite of it and saying, in connection to on the same stage, what he said was, people at the lower rungs of the administrative apparatus, the administrative structure, for your own sake, at the district level and at the zonal level, work hard to make sure that there is sufficient stability to hold elections, because that is where you drive your legitimacy. So he said it. I'm not attributing here. It's not conjecture. It's not a projection. It's not interpretation. This came right from the horse's mouth. The Prime Minister of Ethiopia said that we are going to hold elections as a legitimacy exercise. So elections are going to be held, if they're going to be held. At least for now, they say they're going to hold the elections. As far as I am concerned, the way I see it, it is simply to serve as a legitimacy procedure to renew international recognition, to use that as a case to demonstrate to the international community that the government is still committed to democratic procedures, if not rights, democratic procedures, that it is still in the eyes of the international community should be seen as the disciplined and well-organized among the internal elite, that the future of the country is with the center, not with anybody else. And this message also applies to people in parliament, that your future at the national parliament or regional parliament, your own personal future lies with the maintenance of the power of the center, not colluding with strangers from the mountains or the bushes. And now, this has already started. It will produce. The elections are likely to produce a narrative of a constitutional order. This is the same government, the same prime minister who used to say this constitution is the TPLF constitution, is wrapping itself with the constitutional order. This government that went to war against the TPLF, against the constitution, now wants to produce a narrative of constitutional order. They've already started that. A prime minister who had never attended the celebration of the holiday or the Day of Nations, Nationalities and Peoples of Ethiopia for the last 7 years, he went to that celebration this year, and he did it last year in passing. This year he was the guest of honor, celebrating the idea of Ethiopia is comprised of nations, nationalities, and peoples, something he was denigrating about 6 years ago. So what the elections are likely to do is they produce this narrative, say we are for the Constitution and preserving of the constitutional order. Everybody else is against it. So the this election is likely to be, as far as I see it, from my vantage point, it's going to be post-opposition election. There is no opposition now. Okay, there is absolutely no opposition. Even the opposition that gave it this aura of competitive election in the last election, the IZEMA, is co-opted, for one. And secondly, from what I hear, they have not fielded candidates, and the deadline for fielding candidates had closed. So this is going to be a post-opposition election. Totally post-opposition election. There will be no election. The outcome is known. Participation in it is not to produce victory, like for OFC or OLF or any other political organization that have decided to participate in it. For them, participation is just a matter of survival, not victory, not outcome. And this is close to what is happening here is if Ethiopia is a country that is still in the process of transition to a democratic order, constitutional order, this is not an election that will be conducted at the end of the transitional period. It's not at the end of the election at the point of transitional democracies, such as happened in East Europe or in Africa, in Tunisia, post-transitional order or at the end of transitional order, but something like Uganda or Rwanda, where people go to vote, but the outcome is preordained.
Well, I mean, this is kind of an aside, but isn't it curious that Abiy allowed himself to be filmed at the Nations and Nationalities and People's Day celebrations because what he just described in terms of the significance of that and of acknowledging that day. But then there has been talk for a long time in Ethiopia now that the commission, what was the name, the National Dialogue Commission that he set up, was for the purpose of changing the constitution and making the whole thing presidential. So there is that talk on the one hand, but then he seems to be maybe rowing back from that. Is that what is happening? Maybe you'll give us your insights. But in terms of the elections, I think the broader point is that I don't think there is anybody who doubts that it's a sham election and its purpose is to gain legitimacy. Not even among Ethiopians. I don't think he cares among Ethiopians now because he has a sense of grip and control over the country. But for the international community, at least in the past, it was relatively easier to pretend that Ethiopia was holding democratic elections, even though deep down they knew that they were sham elections. But because there was a semblance of competition, it was easier maybe for them. If you remember the last election, most Western countries chose kind of strategic silence. They didn't acknowledge the election, but they didn't reject it either. But now it's going to be increasingly difficult to maintain silence. So that is the reason why I'm asking you, what is the thinking on the part of Abiy in terms of the election? How is he going to sell it? Because, as you say, there is nobody taking part in it now, because even the supposedly opposition parties have been completely subsumed into the PP ranks.
I guess that's basically what I was trying to say. The election is for the international community. It doesn't matter. Like he said in 2021, when the national elections were held, the European Union, the Americans, and others actually declared that they're not going to even observe it because they knew the outcome was kind of preordained. Look, even since in the last 5 years, since the last election, the world has changed. I don't know if there is a champion of competitive democracy, Jeffersonian democracy in the world today. The Americans have basically abandoned the idea of the rules-based liberal world order. This is what the Trump administration has put out as their national security strategy, that there is no liberal rules-based order. What I mean by that is they don't care. They didn't care then. They worked with Abiy for the last 5 years. Even as he was killing his own people, they worked with him. Now they have publicly declared that spreading democratic rights, democratic values, spreading the idea of freedom, the rules-based liberal world order has been jettisoned, even by the United States. So I don't think it really matters whether Americans see this as democratic or not, because they don't have a democratic order themselves. I can't say the United States is now a democracy. And you can see you're in Europe, the people that are trending towards power are not defenders of democracy or human rights. They're not. So the world has changed. So what is Abiy interested in? The Western Europeans and the United States interested in at this point in time? It's not democracy. It's not freedom. It's not equality. It's not self-determination. We're post that right now, in general, in the world. What they need in that area is no more wars. They don't want any war because of economic reasons. They want internal stability, so they will tell Abiy to stop the wars. They would want regional stability, so they will tell him not to go to war with Eritrea or internally. He has to stop that as a friend. They would encourage him to normalize relations with regionally with his neighbors or apparent enemies like Egypt, and reopen politics just enough in Ethiopia, just enough to prevent conflagration. That's what they are. In general, the West is in a dilemma, not only in Ethiopia, but also in Europe itself. On the one side, as it pertains to Ethiopia, they don't trust Abiy. They know what kind of commodity he is. They know that he is unpredictable. They know that he is incompetent. They know that he is untrustworthy. They know that much. But they fear that if there is collapse, if there is a collapse of authority, the situation would be even more grotesque. They fear that. So they would continue to pressure him to calibrate his approach, but I don't think they would do anything. They would just affirm his power, because they don't see any competitive situation in Ethiopia, and they don't care. Really, though, the West doesn't care about democratic and fair, free and elections. We're post that in the world.
Well, I think that is such a poignant and powerful point about the erosion of democracy and about the fact that nobody seems to be particularly interested in defending and promoting democracy. And the implication of that is that you might as well say to hell with democracy, and you would be able to get away with that. And what that means for Ethiopians, maybe that is a topic for another time, because I think there should be this discussion in the light of a new context and a new framework of the international community doesn't care about democracy anymore, and what does it mean for people who are in dictatorships and authoritarians and all that. But if I could get your kind of reflection on a wider point in terms of Ethiopia, and then we'll go to the Eritrean issue as well. I find it curious that in the space of 7 years, Abiy Ahmed has done a lot of damage, because in 2018 it seemed as though at least the Cairo movement, for instance, were in charge, that they would be able to check regimes, that they would be able to impose themselves, that it would be difficult for regimes in Ethiopia to toy with the people in the way Abiy has been doing. But 7 years down the line, there is no such opposition, there is no such check. He has complete control in the sense that I described, maybe not in other senses. And I wonder at what point should Ethiopian public intellectuals like you, not to put you on the spot personally, but generally, at what point do Ethiopian intellectuals say we are responsible for this, for allowing whatever gains there were to slide and disappear completely? At some point, there should be people who take responsibility for that sort of deterioration in democracy and freedom and in the economy of the country and in all other respects, really.
As I said earlier, this mobilizing structures, Cairo-type mobilizing structures. The Cairo was young people who were organized in different areas and in a decentralized manner. They were like network nodes of operation. That's what the way it was organized. It was novel. The social media was used. The Facebook in particular was used to mobilize these groups. By the way, let me just make this insert this digression that the Cairo movement, the protest movement, was one of the successful social media organized revolutions. The Cairo did bring down the EPRDF dictatorship, but it was a social movement. It was not organized in a way that could take power and govern. So the elite stepped in. The elite in general stepped into the political arena, and then the counter-revolutionary elites were able to oust the revolutionary elite, to remove them from the political system. That is really what happened. The Cairo movement succeeded. It brought about change. There was an opportunity for democratic transition and for political transformation in Ethiopia, but the revolution was hijacked by the internal elites that were part of the EPRDF regime. So it's not just the Cairo, but opposition parties, civil society, independent media are either absorbed or criminalized and then pushed out of the peaceful political arena, or they were militarized. And what I mean by that is the Fano, the Ola. So they moved from the legal realm to the military realm, but internally also their loyalty was fractured and they became fragmented. So there is spontaneous anger in the country. It exists, but there is no infrastructure for mobilizing the anger and channel it. I think if there is going to be change in the country, one should focus not on a protest movement. We have moved away from the protest era symbolized by the Egyptian revolution, the Tunisian, the Arab Spring, that led to the first, or in Egypt, the first democratically elected government in Egypt came democratically to power, but it was removed by the military. Again, the counter-revolutionary forces snapped back, and this has happened in human history a number of times, especially in the post-Enlightenment period. It happened in Europe in 1848, in the 1870s. The ruling elite, when they are defeated, they co-opt the cause of the protest movement. They infiltrate the system, and then they use their presence in the protest movement to dismantle or nibble the movement from within. And that's exactly what happened in Egypt, and it's what happened in Ethiopia. So if there is anything, I don't think there will be an uprising scenario, because that will be catastrophic. What pathways that exist for removing this government is what I said, the fragile elite organization that is divided into different camps, ideologically, ethnically, interest-based. There should be some elite division within the country, and that will happen. The fragmented elite that are kept apart right now and played against each other by one man and his clique, that is going to change. That is really going to change soon, especially from the business elite. The business elite that are paying enormous taxes, that are paying exorbitant contributions. I heard this week, the regime is taking millions of dollars out of the bank account of business people in the country, like in the hundreds of millions, 100 million, as it prepares for war. And this is rapacious. This is not what a government does. Not taking money out of the bank accounts of individuals is just unheard of, but that's exactly what is happening. So the elite, the business elite that had championed this government up until now has had it to its neck. They've had it now. They can't sustain it because there is nothing to sustain even for themselves. There will be a rapture there. So there will be an elite rapture, not a mass revolt, out of economic pressure, the debt, the inflation. Look, when I say the debt, keep this in mind. The Ethiopian government had borrowed $900 billion from the Commercial Bank of Ethiopia. This is not what Ezekiel Gebissa says. This is in the report of the Commercial Bank of Ethiopia. And the Commercial Bank of Ethiopia only recently got its assets into 1 trillion. What that means is all of their holding is taken over by the debt, and I'm talking only about a debt to one bank in Ethiopia. There's no room for maneuver, and you could see the economic leaders of the country, the economic managers, the National Bank governor, the Minister of Finance. They were there with the IMF deputy managing director. Why would IMF send the deputy general manager to Ethiopia if things were okay? And also, I heard that they did not agree, or they could not come to an agreement. So the debt burden, the inflation, the rising unemployment, all of this have begun to force concessions out of the government, like salary increases that they have allowed but unable to pay. I think this is what's going to come to a rupture, not anything. So what would that lead to? It has various scenarios, but I'm not going to get into that.
Well, interesting. You mentioned the government extortion of money from business owners and all that, and I forgot where it was, but I read an essay about this, about the fact that this has become normal now for the government to go around and force people to make contributions. And the writer used this Orwellian term, forced voluntary contribution, the juxtaposition of force and voluntary. But that is how they frame it. They force government employees, but I think non-government employees as well, to make contributions, and the whole thing is framed as though people are making voluntary contributions for one cause or another. But in terms of the broader point, if I could reflect for a minute before we go to Eritrea, I think people should take stock of what happened the past 7 years in the way you did. I think at some level, people should take responsibility for allowing the thing that happened the past 7 years, the Tigray genocide not least, but the destruction and the complete immiseration of the country and all that. It is one thing to say Abiy Ahmed is to blame, the regime is to blame, but I think it's kind of a cop-out answer. I think the elite or the educated class with the means and all that should take responsibility for allowing this state of affairs, I believe. I don't know in what way or how that should happen, because that should be the first step before people engage seriously with the country. Because now, as you will have noticed, Ezekiel, there is a sense of resignation. People seem to have given into despair. Now you talk to people and what they tell you is, well, this is Ethiopia, that is how it's supposed to be. And I find that to be a tragedy, that people should accept the tragic state of affairs that exists today. For me, it's very, very sad. I think Ethiopia has capable people, educated people. If they were given the opportunity, they could change the country. But for some reason, the opportunity simply wouldn't come. And I think it's up to people to create that opportunity. But that was a long TED talk on my part. Let's go to the Eritrean issue, Ezekiel. That is another thing that I wanted to talk to you. I think it was yesterday that Eritrea...
On that point, we should not forget two things. I say that no country or people that I know have been betrayed by the elite as the Ethiopian people have. That is one. The elite betrayal is the elite betrayal. That should be taken to heart. Because you kept saying that the elites should take responsibility or come together. Well, there will always be some responsible, principled elite, but for now, the Ethiopian elite has been either absorbed or killed. It's a barren land. It's not correct to expect anything from the elite. But you fingered me out and say, like yourself, well, I'm one guy that warned the Ethiopian people the day that the Prime Minister came that this is the wrong person. But at that time, who was listening to the dissident elite that said, it's just the wrong man. This is just the wrong man. At that time, everybody was waxing poetic about him. No one was listening. But look at where we are right now. That's the first thing. The second thing is, it's wrong to expect a mass uprising at this point in time. That's not the way this is going to end. And that is what I was saying, that there is no short-term uprising scenario that is not catastrophic. Look at the willingness of this man, to kill 1 million people because they were perceived as the opposition. There is no uprising. This happened in Tigray, in defense of Tigray's self-determination, in defense of Tigray's right to hold regional elections. You know the result. Everybody knows the result. So this uprising uprising mode against the government as in the form of civil disobedience is not in the cards. So if there is any change, it will be more likely to come from elite rupture within the ruling coalition and the security apparatus.
Well, maybe I should add one note. The reason I'm taking it out on you is scared because I know that you could take it, and also we have. I personally, and also I think our listeners share in this view. We have immense respect for you. You are out there fighting. I don't want to be complimentary to you, but I think maybe in this context, it's only proper. Out there fighting in various languages, in Amharic, in Afan Oromo, in English. I think only if people had a fraction of your courage. So when I say the elite, I'm not really including you in them. I think if people had done a fraction of what you have been doing, we would be in a completely different position in terms of the country. So all I have for you is respect.
I was not taking it personally. I was just
but I think you got the point. You got the point. You got why I'm frustrated, because for me it's a tragedy that people should accept the state that Ethiopia is. Why should people accept it? It's a tragedy. Why should war become a fact of life in Ethiopia? Why is it that genocide, war and destruction and displacement have become a rite of passage in the country? People have agency. They should try to change them. And when I reflect on these matters, it really gets into my nerves. Why is that? We're not cursed, really. But anyway, into the Eritrean issue, I think the issue in terms of Ethiopia and Eritrea always is that it seems that there is always something happening. There is a cloud of uncertainty, and sometimes it verges into war and that sort of dark reality. You'll have noticed yesterday Eritrea withdrew from the IGAD. Not that it is a serious organization, but maybe it's a sign of something brewing. And maybe about 2 or 3 weeks ago, the Ethiopian foreign minister gave a speech in relation to Eritrea, where basically, I think you have read it because you shared the article yesterday with me. His point essentially is that Eritrea is a troublemaker, that it has some sort of birth defect, and that it is up to Ethiopia to correct Eritrea in some sense. And you put everything together, and then the port issue, and the picture that emerges is not a positive one. What are your readings in terms of the Ethiopia and Eritrea? I think I have lost you, Scared.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
I read that the honeymoon is over. There was a honeymoon between Abiy and Eritrea. In the article that you just said, that the whole article actually wants to totally obliterate that there was a love fest between the two in 2020, 21, 22. Well, actually beginning in 2019. So it's over. It's now clear that it is over. It also shows that the honeymoon in the first place was basically the alliance was tactical, not strategic. An alliance that was really built on a shared enemy, on a common perceived enemy, but not based on long-term interests. So that has ended. That short love fest has basically ended. That now that the division is clear, the fault line is clear. It's visible that Eritrea. Look, during the Tigray War, Eritrea basically disarmed Ethiopia. So many divisions of the Ethiopian army, they attacked Tigray from Eritrea. And when they left all of their weapons in Eritrea, except their uniform. In fact, the Eritreans told the Ethiopian soldiers, you can't even take a shower here, just go and do it in your own country. So they left everything: the tanks, the automatic weapons, the long-range guns like the cannon and all those heavy weapons and light weapons and medium-range weapons, all kinds of munitions were left in Eritrea. So Ethiopia, by their own miscalculation, by their own short-term personalist relationship against a common enemy, perceived common enemy, by the way. Maybe the TPLF, Eritrea, the Eritrean leader had personal grudges against the TPLF that are real, personally, not Eritrea, but personally. He wanted revenge. He had wanted revenge. Not a long-term issue, but the revenge for what had happened to him under the TPLF. And the TPLF went to war in 1999, 1980, 98, and 2000, not for the TPLF, but for Ethiopia. But right now we're about, if we believe what the TP government is saying, that all of this didn't happen. So Eritrea disarmed Ethiopia, but now they feared that Ethiopia might be rearming itself against Eritrea. So there is really an armed, what is it called, the competition for arms, or arms race in the Horn of Africa. A huge arms race in the Horn of Africa. Ethiopia is rearming, Eritrea is rearming, and the whole region is being armed. So there is this competition. Eritrea also fears, they've been fearing this, that the political fragmentation based on ethnic lines in Ethiopia might spill over to Eritrea. That is a concern for Eritreans. I know some elite sycophants say, oh, it's none of your business. But the Eritrean president speaks of this because, not because he fears it for Ethiopians, but he fears that it might spill over to Eritrea. He also fears that he might be sidelined by Abiy, because Ethiopia is a bigger country, so the big powers in that area, the regional powers in that area, might align with it against Eritrea. That is really a fundamental concern that Eritrea has. Not the little things that they talk about, ports and all that, but these are the fundamental disagreements that came to the surface once the honeymoon is over. And on the Ethiopian side, Ethiopia resents Eritrea's autonomy, because an autonomous Eritrea, and really this is important, an autonomous Eritrea could destabilize Ethiopia by supporting the dissident forces. Eritrea could do more damage internationally through its connections with like-minded leaders in the region and outside the region. Eritrea has a strategic position in the Red Sea area, which they might farm out to one or the other power, the middle power, or any other power in that region, that they have that attraction. Eritrea also resents Eritrea's continued rearmament or militarization, because an Eritrea that is autonomous, and an Eritrea that is heavily militarized, and an Eritrean leader adept at subverting his enemies. Keep in mind that he's been in power for more than 30 years by pitting one group against the other through his machinations, internationally and locally. He's a very mercurial leader. So Abiy fears that he might be the chosen leader if there is a regional normalization. All of these factors are really structural. So could this lead to war? I don't know. It looks like the Ethiopians are retreating. that Horn Review is basically revealing a couple of issues that we might go to war, to summarize it, we might go to war, but if we go to war, it's not because of the port, or it's not because of geography, but because of Eritrea's fixation. So the narrative has changed in that we might go to war, but if you go to war, it's not because of us wanting the port, it's because of Eritrea. All right, so things are in flux right now, but these are really the structural causes that are tipping both of them into war. What will trigger war? Could be anybody's guess. But did you say something about IGAD as well?
Yeah, because Eritrea announced that it has left IGAD, and I thought that might be in reaction to, because the perception, I don't know how true it is that Ethiopia controls IGAD and that it is an agent for Ethiopia's interests. And I thought Eritrea withdrawing from that has something to do with the growing tension between the two countries.
Yeah, Eritrea has not been positive about African organizations in general. They have always looked down disdainfully on the AU.
Well, just to give you more information, there is a new editorial on the Horn Review website, which we presume is connected with the PP regime anyway. And the point they make is that Eritrea doesn't have a history of working with multilateral organizations, and that is the reason why it has found it difficult to work in IGAD.
Okay, we don't presume that the Horn Review is connected with the regime. It is the regime's mouthpiece because it's actually funded.
Well, I'm pretending to be a journalist. So yeah, but I understand.
I understand that, but I'm just expressing my thoughts about that. That it's not a presumption; it is real, is what I'm trying to say. That yes, you use your words as a journalist, but I am not a journalist, so I put it in perspective that it is not a presumption. The Horn Review is basically a think tank under the Institute of Foreign Affairs, which is a part of the Ethiopian government, and the recent reorganization itself was done by the Ethiopian government. They work for the Ethiopian government. The notion that the Horn Review is independent, by the way, this is actually talking to the Horn Review people. Their outrage when they're told that they're part of the government, they come up with this outrage as if that is not true. It is true you work for the government. So the Horn Review is a reflection, sort of appearing to be independent, but it is totally embedded in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and it is controlled by the Prime Minister, and whatever they're writing should be seen as the view of the government. That's what I wanted to start. IGAD, so whatever they say about IGAD should be read as the view of the Ethiopian government. That's the way it should be seen. So they always insist, saying that they're not government affiliated, they're a think tank. You're not. You're not a think tank. You're not even a tank. You're not even thinking, as far as I'm concerned. You're a government of Ethiopia. Now back to the IGAD issue. That IGAD is not an independent entity. It's never been an independent entity, and it's not an independent entity right now. It hasn't achieved any of its goals. When it was established, it was established to fight drought and famine. It hasn't achieved its goals in that area. IGAD has not done nothing in those areas. And when it was reorganized or reformed recently from IGAD to IGAD, they put out their goal is to maintain peace and security, achieve food security and environmental protection, economic integration, and infrastructure building. Which one has IGAD done? It is economic integration. So it's when Eritrea says IGAD is kind of useless, there is a point there. So whether they are in IGAD or they are not in IGAD, it doesn't really matter because IGAD is not important. It just doesn't have the wherewithal, the brain capacity, the finance that would be necessary. The finance that would be necessary to achieve all of those goals. They don't have the money for it. So it's not a non-event as far as I'm concerned. Eritrea withdrawing from IGAD is a non-event. And it cannot be reduced to simply Eritrea's apparently childish tantrum that they get into an organization and get out of the organization when they. It's not a tantrum, but that does not mean that this is not symbolic. It's not about Eritrea's petulance, but it is not. It's not something that to be disregarded as well. It signals Eritrea's growing isolation in the IGAD area. And when I say this is really symbolic isolationism, that everybody fears Ethiopia. Djibouti fears Ethiopia, Kenya fears Ethiopia, Somalia fears Ethiopia, maybe Somalia has a little bit of courage. And Somaliland fears Ethiopia because of its sheer size. So they're not going to antagonize Ethiopia, even though they speak to Eritrea. All of them speak to Eritrea. So there is this symbolic isolationism that Eritrea wants to reject. It also should be seen that Eritrea is really rejecting this apparent regional norms. The idea that the Ethiopian government appointed executive secretary who is beholden to Ethiopia and owes his position to Abiy Ahmed is an independent player is a joke. So Eritrea is basically rejecting that. And thirdly, and more ominously, this shows that Eritrea is preparing to act in its own way, not in the framework of regional organization. So historically, Eritrea has withdrawn from regional or continental organizations when it anticipates that it has to go on its own. So I guess that is significant in that sense, but the withdrawal itself, it doesn't say anything about IGAD. IGAD is not as important, has never been an important entity or an effective entity.
Well, now that there is a strong reason to believe the Horn Review is a mouthpiece of the regime, maybe I could add some information for our listeners as well. Recently, the past couple of days, it has been in a state of hysteria, you could say. Every morning there is editorial. That would be the first think tank where it gives editorial every morning, because normally that doesn't happen. And all of them are about Eritrea. And there are times when they seem to be experimenting with arguments and floating ideas. And one of the ideas that they have been floating now is whether Ethiopia could withdraw its recognition of Eritrea at the state. And that is important because, I don't know if you have watched it, but there was a clip from Abiy Ahmed doing the rounds where he was saying that he couldn't find the documents where the recognition of Eritrea and Ethiopia were discussed and the letters exchanged and all that. I don't know if you saw that. And maybe that is one thing that Ethiopia is considering now. I don't know how dangerous or how unprecedented that would be, but maybe they are thinking of withdrawing recognition of Eritrea as a sovereign state. If you could reflect on that as well, because I find this interesting, that should be under consideration.
Well, on the point that the Prime Minister said that he couldn't find the document acquiescing Eritrea's de facto independence, I think that's what he means. There is no Council of Ministers minutes. There is no parliamentary action.
Well, he says that there is no. He said that he couldn't figure out who made the decision, the final decision, for instance, to allow Eritrea to hold referendum, to recognize it, and so that was the point he was trying to get at.
Yeah, let me just go back to my point that That's what he says, that the Council of Ministers hasn't made that decision. The Parliament hasn't made that decision. The TPLF alone made that decision is what he is projecting. That's what he's basically saying. It's a step in the point that you made about delegitimizing Eritrea's independence. Said that we looked for it everywhere. Said, what a stupid way of putting it. Like, I could have told him that there is no document to look for because we know the Council of Ministers hasn't decided. We know there was no parliament that decided on this issue because Eritrea was independent, not because of by de jure act, but by de facto winning of the war. This editorial that you just mentioned makes this point, the editorial by the Horn Review. It says something like Eritrea emerged, or whatever it says, that the unilateral decision by the TPLF-led transition in Addis Ababa made that decision, but the Eritrean peoples, also in the same paragraph, they say the Eritrean People's Liberation Front, now the PFDJ, emerged victorious from the Ethiopian Civil War. What kind of document were you looking for? This same point that you just made, that it's in there. It says Eritrea emerged victorious from the Ethiopian Civil War. Eritrea fought for 30 years after their federation was dissolved in 1962. They fought for 30 years. They emerged victorious, and they create a fact on the ground. What is that supposed to? The TPLF supposed to do? If it is about the ports, remember, all of you that are listening, remember, there was an agreement between Eritrea and Ethiopia at the time that Eritrean ports, Assab and Massawa, will be a free port. Negotiation, they say, it will be a free port. I remember Isaias Afwerki himself came to the National Press Club here. He made that point. There was an agreement. Eritrean ports, Assab and Massawa, were going to be a free port. The change came after the war in 1998. So the notion that TPLF-led transition without any mandate, popular mandate or parliamentary authorization, there was no reason for popular mandate. There was no parliament to approve this. The fact was created on the ground because of what you just said, that the Horn Review itself says that Eritrea emerged victorious from the Ethiopian Civil War. The second point of referendum is simply an acceptance of the de facto creation of the Eritrean state. So, do they want to withdraw at this point in time? Do they want to withdraw Eritrea's recognition? What difference does it make? What difference does it make? Did Ethiopia give Eritrea their independence? Did Ethiopia grant? Ethiopia simply acquiesced, simply accepted the fact that was created on the ground militarily. And then the issue moved from Ethiopia's hands or Eritrea's hands to the international fora, where the United Nations actually observed the referendum, which the Eritrean people made, the referendum that produced 99.8%. And when Eritrea, and I keep reminding people, when Eritrea became a member of the United Nations, and I'm sure they're going to say, oh, the Secretary General of the United Nations was an Egyptian at the time. They will say that, believe me, Taklai. The Ethiopian government would say that in their naked iteration of their absurd reasoning. Boutros Ghali, when Eritrean flag was going up, when it was being hoisted at the United Nations headquarters, Eritrea as an independent state recognized by members of the United Nations as an independent state and accepted as a member state, he said, the war that Eritrean people had fought for 30 years ended in producing an independent Eritrea. Now we have accepted the referendum, and Eritrea is a member state, a sovereign member of the United Nations. What difference does it make? Ethiopia withdrew its. What are they going to do? That when they withdraw, they write a letter to the United Nations? They're going to make a press conference? What are they going to do? They go to Asmara and say, we don't accept you? What is the actual act of unrecognition? I've never heard of unrecognition as a, but what is that they're going to do, and what difference does it make if Ethiopia said so? Eritrea is, whether people like it or not, and I'm not saying this like because I am for Eritrea's independence or not. Not about that. It's just a normative expression saying the facts are the facts. Eritrea is a member of the United Nations. Eritrea is a sovereign state. Whether Eritrea has a constitution, parliament, or economic planning is immaterial. It doesn't matter. Eritrea is a state, and if Ethiopia really wants a ports or anything else, or not to be landlocked by geography, or this is the word that he himself used as the Prime Minister of Ethiopia. He said that Ethiopia will never be a prisoner of geography. And now this Horn review is saying that it's not geography, it's political fixation. It takes me a long time to go through it, but it is absurd.
Well, contradictions and the PP regime are very synonymous. But in terms of Eritrean independence scale, I think many Ethiopians find it psychologically difficult to accept that Eritrea won their independence fair and square through winning the war, as they say. But I think the perception that many Ethiopians have is that it was a gift. It was within Ethiopia's grace and the gift to allow Eritrea to become independent, which is why conversation about whether to withdraw it or not becomes has a bit of sense. So that is where they're coming from. But I think the argument from Ethiopian side is that as things stand now, they couldn't invade because then Ethiopia would be accused of breaching international border, but that if it doesn't recognize Eritrea as a sovereign state anymore, then that charge couldn't be made. That is the argument. I don't know how solid it is, but that is what they would say.
I kind of slightly disagree with you that the Ethiopian people are still psychologically traumatized by the Eritrean independence. You know, it's been 30 years, 3 decades, even more than 3 decades. What that means is more than 60% of the Ethiopian population today was born after the Eritrean independence. So those that are psychologically traumatized, most of them are in their graves. They're not alive. This generation, the new generation, knows Eritrea as an independent country. They don't remember that Ethiopia was part of Ethiopia. They don't remember that. They accept only Eritrea. They know Eritrea only as an independent country, and this thing is really strange to them that Ethiopia is conjuring up past history selectively to bolster their position. So, look, there was no demand. There was no demand. There was no movement. There was no organization that was demanding that Ethiopia should go back and reclaim its port, the asset port. There was no. If anybody knows, except that some Ethiopians of that era were debating the issue during elections. Other than that, there was no movement. There was no commotion in Ethiopia because Ethiopia was doing very well without a port. The notion that Ethiopia, this is an existential question for Ethiopia, is a fabrication of the PP for their own reasons. It's not true. Ethiopia registered tremendous growth without a port. Tremendous growth without a port. But that's an issue that is separate what you and I might talk about, what the port demand is. But what they're saying right now that Eritrea, you see, the idea of fixation, that Eritrea's fixation, that's what the title of the editorial is, saying that should there be war with Eritrea, it's not because of geography, but Asmara's fixation, political fixation. It's not geography. the president of Biltzigana party was not saying that exactly that. The first day that he came back, he came with the idea of we're going to reclaim the port. He had this PowerPoint presentation in which he talked about water on that on water on the eastern coast of Ethiopia and water on this side. He was explaining what water meant, the chemicals in water, what water means. On that day, didn't he say about it's all about geography? Didn't he say in the parliament a few weeks ago that that Ethiopia will never be a prisoner of geography? Didn't he say that only a few weeks ago? What do they think that the Ethiopian people are? What do they think we are? Stupid as they are. He's the one that said, and they have no shame whatsoever. And they say it's not because of geography, even though they said it is because of geography. It's because of geography. When launching the demand to reclaim Assad, and only recently in Parliament he said it is because of geography. And now the Horn regime mouthpiece is trying to convince us it's not about geography. You know, they say it's about fixation. And what are those fixations? Number one, the fixation is Eritrea miscalculated. Eritrea miscalculated that Ethiopia as a nation would remain inert. That is their word. That Ethiopia would never reconsider its own calculations and miscalculations. That the Ethiopian people would remain detached. You know what that would mean? Both of those mean that Eritrea miscalculated that Ethiopia would never get such a bright leader that would undetach the Ethiopian people from their slumber of 1,000 years. They would never find a leader like that, but now they have a leader. Eritrea is fixated on the past. Ethiopia is going into the future. That is the fixation. Eritrea's fixation on the past. Second, Eritrea's fixation and hostility towards Ethiopia. And in that, they include the Tigrayan War. They say that war was not, they tell us, Horn Review wants to tell us now, only in a matter of 3 years, they want to tell us that Eritrea did not join the war in Tigray because of their miscalculation or provocation. Even though they told us Eritrea was provoked into entering it by the rocket that TPLF fired, not because of provocation, because they have this historical hostility towards Ethiopia. Now they want to tell us that war, Eritrea's intervention in the Tigray war, was not at the invitation of Ethiopia or the Ethiopian leader. It is because Eritrea's fixation. That Eritrea joined that war not against the TPLF, but against Ethiopia. That's what they've written. That is the fixation. So the end is, the end or the postulate in that argument is that there will be war. But if there is war, we're going to war with Eritrea to I don't know what the word would be in English, to crush the lice. That's what he said in the lice. Now the Eritrea is a bug in Ethiopia's hair. It's a bug, and next time that they're going there, they're going to dislodge the bug from Ethiopia's head. It's so ominous. What they're saying is so ominous that I don't know what the consequence would be. And it is at that point that I kept saying, we don't need a war with Eritrea. Ethiopia does not need a war with Eritrea. Now both sides are armed to the teeth, and that war is not going to be a war between Ethiopia and Eritrea alone. It's going to engulf the entire area. On one side, a couple of Arab states; on the other side, African states, and the network of forces that have pervaded the region. It's going to be a catastrophic war. Let me repeat that. If this war is going to be had, It's going to be a catastrophic war from which nobody is going to benefit. Not Eritrea, not Ethiopia. It will be a catastrophe for the region.
Well, it's curious that the PP is in a roundabout way now conceding that Eritrea had committed crimes in Tigray. I wonder what that means in terms of criminal responsibility later, because in the past Abiy had conceded that Eritrea came to Tigray through his invitation, and now they are conceding that they have committed crimes. And surely this must mean something in terms of legal responsibility later when it comes to that. But maybe one or two final points, Ezekiel. As much as I would have loved to speak to you the whole night, I think I should let you go to lunch. Just one point of maybe our listeners would want to hear your reflections on. If we were to be fair to both Ethiopia and Eritrea, and as Ethiopians, of course, they frame it in very historical manner, but they say that this is a country of 120 million people. It's a geographic prison, that it is unfair that Eritrea should have two ports, such a tiny nation, and that there should be some degree of compromise. I think that would be the best way of kind of making the case for the PP. What kind of compromise do you think, in the best case, again, if sensible people were to be in charge in both Ethiopia and Eritrea, what kind of compromise should they look for in general?
You mean on Ethiopia's claim
to the port? Yes, yes.
Number one, what does Ethiopia want? Number one, I think we raised this issue.
Or maybe what is it that it should want? Yeah, what is it that it should want? Maybe that is part of the question as well.
As far as I'm concerned right now, nothing. Ethiopia, not a port. Ethiopia needs internal stability, the end of the war, economic rehabilitation, and political cohesion. That's what Ethiopia needs, to be honest. What Ethiopia needs is not a port. Ethiopia does not need a port at this point in time. The port of Djibouti is Ethiopia's port, but that's another issue. I could talk about why at this point in time a port is not a matter of life and death for Ethiopia, as the PP are saying. What happened to the port of Djibouti, Berbera, and Lamu? Is that expensive? Maybe. But is it worth another war? That's the question. Is it worth another catastrophic war that you're going to save maybe $1 million or $100 million, but in order to save $1 million that you would pay to Djibouti, Somaliland, or Somalia, or Kenya? That is what you want to save in order to go to war? So if you're asking me at this point in time, there is no competition here. There is really no need for it. And the PP did not really say we need it now. All they're saying is that in the future we are going to be 200 million, and when we are 200 million, we need a port. That's what they're saying. So based even on their own characterization and reasoning, there is no need for a port right now. In the future, when we are 150 million, listen, understand me for what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that based on the PP's characterization of the need for access to the sea, there is no urgency right now because they said we're going to be 150 million people. We're going to be 200 million in 25 years. That's when we're going to need. I didn't say that. It is the Prime Minister of Ethiopia, the chief of Ethiopia's armed services, that kept saying this. And the many generals that tried to make a case, they said it's not because of today, it's because of our future. Fantastic. So there is no need for port right now. But if Ethiopia needs a port in the future, there is a law, international law, how you could acquire access to the sea. Not a sovereign port, but access to the sea. It's a complicated issue. I'm not going to raise this complicated issue at this point in time of our conversation, but there is a way. There is a way. Eritrea is not going to need two ports. Those are kind of natural harbor for the interior of Ethiopia, not just Ethiopia, but also for South Sudan, for Uganda, for even the Democratic Republic of Congo. That's why those ports are going to be needed, not just for Ethiopia. If diplomacy, forward thinking, and restraints and good counsel, it's not just for Ethiopia. The ports are actually a harbor for all of us. And the Eritreans have said, you could use it in the future, but use law, diplomacy, and you could do that. But Ethiopia is saying, no, I need a port, a sovereign port. If Ethiopia wants a sovereign port, it's narrow. The options are narrow. It's not non-existent. Ethiopia could acquire a narrow access to the sea. But if it is a narrow access to the sea so that it could have its own sovereign port, another matter. But what Ethiopia needs is access to the sea, which means over the not just the land, Eritrea's land, not just the port, but also the territorial water, about 200 miles into the sea, which are the territorial water of Eritrea. Access to the sea is way to the high seas. That's what access to the sea means. If that's what Ethiopia wants, again, there is diplomacy. Isn't it the Ethiopian Prime Minister that actually said, when me and Isaias are in agreement, the price for Ethiopia is Assad? Well, just do that. Just do that. Forget about Eritrea's fixation. Eritrea is not going to do anything with those ports. Isaias is not going to remain alive forever. Think about the next generation. We don't need another round of devastating war. What we need is patience, good counsel, adroit diplomacy, and international law. That's what we need. But is it going to happen in Ethiopia? Look, what the Ethiopians are saying in this editorial is that Eritrea's political identity is built around Ethiopia's internal vulnerabilities. That's what Eritrea's fixation is. And they cite examples like persistent examples of subversion and hostility, not geography that fuel conflict. So regional stability. Here's what the reasoning is. The recent reasoning of Ethiopia is regional instability in the Horn of Africa stems from Eritrea's political fixation, not maritime laws. So for Ethiopia and for the Horn of Africa to achieve regional instability, Eritrea has lived as existed as a state, but has always been an external disruptor, a destabilizer in the region. We just have to eliminate Eritrea.
Well, you mentioned a lot of strands that I would like us to return to another time. But now, final point, Ezekiel, to be fair to the people, to the PP supporters, and to promote best journalistic practice, I'm going to play devil's advocate just one final time. You know that when people listen to this conversation, which is very critical of Abiy for the right reasons, I believe, but there are people who listen to this and say, you're being unfair to Abiy. This is a man who completed the biggest dam in Africa. He's trying to give Ethiopia the opportunity to own its own ports. He's trying to return Ethiopia to its glorious past, and that you should be positive about him. There are people who say, and I'm not going to ask you whether you agree with them or not, but I'm going to ask you whether there is something for which you give Abiy a bit of credit. It's an absurd question, but I thought I would try that. Is there anything that we should give him credit for in terms of the big thing that he's trying to do?
How are you going to be fair to a brutal dictator? How are you going to be fair to the examples that you used, like Hitler or Stalin, how are you going to be fair to them? How is that you could be fair to a man that killed about at least a million of his own compatriots, his own citizens, still left them vulnerable, still at it? He will never give up on Tigray. He will never relent. He will never relax his grip. How are you going to be fair to someone like that? How are you going to be fair to ethnic cleanser, a genocider, a brutal dictator, a man that divided a country into fragments? How are you going to be fair to a man like that? And am I going to be ashamed of being consistently against him? I mean, it doesn't make sense to be fair. I don't know how to be fair to a brutal dictator. It's not about fairness. It's about the truth as I see it. Now, you want fairness? If you want fairness, when he became prime minister, he released political prisoners. He opened the political space somewhat. Well, I'll give him freedom, some credit for that. But then he closed all of those, reversed all of those. He ended that hostility with Eritrea, got a prize for it. Right? Then let's give him the credit for that. But all of those are undone. All of those things that you could give him credit are undone, reversed. But it is really not. I'm a moral. My concern is about morality. My concern is about truth, not any political party. It's not about being fair. It's not about fairness. It's about justice. It's based on truth. So anybody who says that your analysis is wrong, let's debate. Okay? It's not a question of fairness. Judging on the basis of truth, judging on the basis of record, judging on the basis of his unapologetic venture as it is right now, and the future that he promises to the Ethiopian people of war and devastation. There is no point in those kinds of meaningless arguments about fairness.
Well, I asked you because I knew that you were going to say this powerful thing. I think sometimes people forget that we are talking about a genocidal maniac, and it's always good to, from time to time, remind people of what kind of person Abiy is and the damage he has done to Ethiopia. And I'm good that you mentioned Tigray. Even now, he is getting in the way of people returning to their homes. So it's not just that he committed genocide and moved on, but he's insistent on keeping on doing what he has been doing. But thank you very much, Ezekiel, for the time today. I hope we're not going to have any sound issues today, but it was such a joy, and thank you very much.
You're welcome.